The bank was crowded, and I stood there with papers in my hands, waiting for my turn. All I wanted was to correct the mistake I had noticed. But when I spoke, the manager smirked and said, "You're too old for this, sir." My chest tightened, and all I could think was, how did it come to this? What happened next was more than just correcting the mistake. My name's Tom Harper, and for most of my 62 years, I thought hard work and a clear head would earn you a seat at the table. I grew up in a small house in Rochester, New York, the kind with creaky floors and a furnace that groaned every winter. My dad was a mechanic, my mom a school secretary. They taught me to show up, do the job right, and keep your word. I carried that into my career at a local accounting firm. 35 years, I crunched numbers, balanced books, caught mistakes. Nobody else saw. Got my degree from a community college back in '81, framed it myself. It's still on my wall, a little faded but solid proof I knew my stuff. Retirement wasn't my choice. The firm downsized in 2012, and I was out. Pension's enough for rent and groceries, but it's tight. Still, I stayed sharp. I read the financial section every morning, checked my statements, even helped my neighbor Sally with her taxes. Numbers were my language, always had been. I'd walk into First National Bank every month, same branch on Main Street, with its polished counters and humming air conditioning. The tellers knew me, smiled, called me Mr. Harper. I'd deposit my check, ask a question or two, and leave feeling like I still had a grip on things. It was routine, orderly, the way I liked it. But lately I'd noticed a shift. The smiles felt forced. The new staff, all young, barely looked up from their screens. I'd stand there holding my papers, feeling like I was fading into the background. I told myself it was nothing, just the world moving faster. I'd earned respect over the years, decades of it. I believed that counted for something. But deep down, I started wondering if age wasn't just a number anymore. It felt like a mark, like someone had stamped expired on my forehead. I pushed that thought away, kept showing up, kept asking my questions, until that one day when I walked into the bank with a folder in my hand, thinking I could still make a difference. I had no idea how wrong I was. The bank smelled like polished wood and coffee. Same as always. I stood in line at First National, clutching my folder, the kind with a cracked leather edge from years of use. The place was busy. Phones buzzing, keyboards clacking, people shifting in their seats. I'd been here 100 times, but that day felt different. I'd gone over my account statement at home, sipping my morning coffee, and spotted something off, a fee that didn't add up, listed twice. It wasn't huge, maybe $50, but it bugged me. I knew numbers didn't lie, and I wasn't about to let it slide. I figured I'd ask, clear it up, maybe even help them catch a glitch. The line moved slow. I watched a young woman, maybe 25, step up to the counter. She had a sleek ponytail and a phone glued to her hand. The teller, a guy with a sharp haircut, leaned in, all smiles. "No problem, Miss. Carter, let me walk you through it," he said, his voice warm, like he had all day. She asked about some app, and he explained it. Patient as anything, I nodded to myself. That's how it should be. Clear, respectful. My turn was next, and I felt steady, ready to lay out what I'd found. I wasn't some clueless old guy. I'd balanced books for decades. I could handle this. I stepped up to the counter, my folder under my arm. The teller, a woman named Linda from her name tag, glanced at me, then back at her screen. No smile, just a quick, "What do you need, sir?" Her voice was flat, like she was already done with me. I cleared my throat, kept my tone even. "I noticed a double charge on my statement," I said, sliding the paper across. "It's on page 2, Line 14. Can you check if it's a mistake? She barely looked at it, just typed something, her eyes flicking to the line behind me. I stood there, waiting, feeling the weight of the room. Another teller nearby, younger, shot a look my way, sharp like I was holding things up. Then I saw the manager, a guy in his 30s, striding over. His tie was too tight, his face all business. He didn't even glance at my papers, just leaned on the counter and said, "Is there a problem here?" His tone wasn't curious, it was cold, like I was already wasting his time. I started to explain, but something in his eyes stopped me short. It wasn't just impatience. It was like he'd already decided I didn't belong here, like my question wasn't worth hearing. I gripped my folder tighter, my knuckles pale, and thought, I'm not invisible. I know what I'm talking about. But the air in that bank was starting to feel like a wall, pushing me out. His words landed heavy, like a door slamming shut on years of quiet competence. I froze at the counter, the fluorescent hum above us drilling into my skull, while the folder in my grip suddenly felt like dead weight, pages crinkling under my thumb. Linda hovered off to the side, her badge glinting under the lights, fingers twisting the hem of her blouse as if she wanted to vanish into the marble floor. Behind me, the queue stirred faintly. The vet in his faded cap shifted his weight, his boots scuffing the tile, eyes fixed on some invisible spot ahead. I could taste the metallic tang of tension on my tongue, but I straightened up, voice steady as I tapped the statement again. It's clear as day here. 15th and 20th, same fee, exact amounts. Just pull up the log. It'll take 2 minutes. The manager, his name tag read Ethan Mills, didn't budge. He planted his elbows on the counter, sleeves riding up to show a watch that screamed new money, and scanned me head to toe, his gaze lingering on the gray at my temples like it was evidence in a trial. Mr. Harper, I appreciate the concern, he said, drawing out my name like it tasted sour. But trust me, our software flags these things automatically. You're probably mixing it up with one of those old paper statements from back in the day. The dismissal sliced clean. No anger in his tone, just that polished certainty that made my skin crawl. I glanced at the young woman at the adjacent window, her ponytail swinging as she pocketed her receipt, the teller there nodding along to her chatter about interest rates, like it was the most fascinating story. I leaned in a fraction, the cool edge of the counter biting into my palms, and kept my eyes on his. I'm not mixing anything up. I taught classes on this exact process 15 years ago. Run the query. Account numbers on top. My pulse thrummed in my ears, not wild, but insistent, like a warning I couldn't ignore. Ethan's lips thinned, and he straightened, adjusting his tie with a flick that screamed impatience. He shot a quick look at Linda, who busied herself with a stack of forms, her cheeks flushing pink. Then he turned back, voice dropping low enough that only we'd hear, but loud enough to echo in my head. Listen, sir, I don't mean to be rude, but you're too old to be second-guessing our systems. We've got protocols for a reason, and they don't include retirees playing detective. The bank's air turned thick, pressing on my chest. Like an unpaid bill piling up, my mind reeled. Flashes of boardrooms where I'd fixed bigger messes, clients shaking my hand with real gratitude, now reduced to this. A stranger's smirk, erasing it all. The vet cleared his throat behind me, a low rumble that said he'd seen this script before, but no one spoke up. Linda's eyes flicked to mine for a split second. Sympathy there, buried under fear of the clock or the next shift. I felt the heat creep up my neck, not rage but a dull ache, like swallowing glass. Those papers in my hands, They weren't just ink and numbers anymore. They were my proof, my stake, and he just labeled them worthless. I wanted to shove them across, demand he read every line, but my feet rooted, the lines murmur swelling around us like judgment. Ethan waved a hand, casual as dismissing a fly. If you insist, I'll have someone look later. But really, go home, enjoy your day. We'll mail you an update. His smile didn't reach his eyes, all teeth and no warmth, and he pivoted toward the next customer, a kid in jeans clutching a debit card. I stood there, the statement curling in my fist. Every wrinkle, a fresh cut. The young guy got the full rundown, Ethan leaning in, explaining fees with that same easy charm he denied me. I watched, throat tight, as the kid nodded, thanked him, walked out without a backward glance. Me? I was still there, invisible now. The weight of 62 years, settling like dust, no one bothered to sweep. That ache twisted deeper. A quiet fury I hadn't felt since the layoff notice hit my desk. I'd paid into this system my whole life, taxes, fees, loyalty, and one offhand line from this kid in a tie had stripped it bare. My mind raced. Walk away, let it fester, or push until something cracked. The vet met my gaze in the reflection of the glass door, his nod subtle, like he knew the fork in the road. But the room spun slow, the clock ticking louder, and all I could do was fold the papers shut, the snap echoing my resolve, cracking just a hair. Ethan's words were still ringing in my ears, sharp as a slammed door. I stood frozen at the counter, the air thick with that sterile bank smell, ink, cleaning spray, and something faintly sour like old coffee. My fingers tightened around the folder, the edges biting into my palm, and for a second I wanted to just walk away, grab my papers, shuffle out to the parking lot, drive home to my quiet apartment, and let the whole thing dissolve. Like a bad dream. It'd be easier, cleaner, no scene, no fuss. Just swallow the sting and move on, like I'd done 100 times when the world pushed me aside after the layoff. But something in my gut twisted, hard and stubborn, like a rusted bolt refusing to budge. I wasn't done yet. I glanced around. Linda, the teller, was sorting papers now, her movements jerky, avoiding my eyes like I was a problem she didn't want to touch. The queue behind me had grown, maybe 10 people, their murmurs low, their stares heavy but fleeting. The young woman with the ponytail was long gone, her heels a fading echo, but the vet in the cap, his face weathered like old leather, was still there, watching. His eyes caught mine for a split second, and I saw it. Something like recognition, like he'd been in my shoes. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me pause. I opened my folder again, slower this time, and slid out a different paper, one I hadn't touched in years. My diploma from 1981, creased, but intact, the ink still proud, despite the decades. I'd earned it at Monroe Community College, nights and weekends while working full-time. Back then, it meant something. Proof I could hold my own. That I wasn't just some guy punching a clock. I set it on the counter, right next to the statement, and looked Ethan square in the face. This says I know a thing or two about numbers, I said, my voice low but steady, like I was laying down a bet. I taught accounting seminars in the 90s. I'm not guessing here. Check the charge. Ethan's jaw tightened, his lips curling into a smirk that didn't quite hide his annoyance. He didn't touch the diploma, just flicked his eyes over it like it was junk mail. Impressive, Mr. Harper, he said, his tone dripping with something that wasn't respect. But that was a long time ago. Systems change. You can't expect to keep up. He turned to Linda, nodding toward the next customer, dismissing me without another word. My chest burned, not with rage, but with something heavier, grief maybe, for the man I'd been, the one they refused to see. I gathered my papers, the diploma slipping back into the folder, its weight both anchor and lifeline. I stepped away from the counter, legs heavy, like I was wading through mud. The bank's hum pressed in, keyboards, phones, the soft ding of the door as someone left. I could have walked out then, let the silence win, but that stubborn knot in my gut wouldn't let go. I moved to the side near the water fountain and caught my breath. That's when I noticed her, a woman in her late 60s maybe, standing a few spots back in line. She had a knit scarf, gray hair pinned neat, and a stack of papers clutched like a shield. Her eyes met mine, sharp but tired, and she gave a small nod, like she'd seen the whole thing. "You okay?" she asked. Voice soft but firm, like she wasn't just making small talk. Her name tag pinned to her coat read, "Margaret." I hesitated, then nodded back, my throat tight. "Not really," I admitted, keeping my voice low so the others wouldn't hear. "They act like I'm invisible." Margaret's lips pressed thin, and she glanced at Ethan, still chatting brightly with a guy in a hoodie at the counter. "They do that," she said, her words clipped but heavy with experience. "Last week they told me my mortgage question was too complicated for me to worry about. I've been paying that loan 30 years. Her words hit like a spark. It wasn't just me. This wasn't some fluke, some bad day for Ethan. It was a pattern, a system that shoved people like us, people with gray hair and years of living, into a corner marked irrelevant. I felt a shift, small but real, like a crack in a dam. "They're wrong," I said, more to myself than her, but she nodded anyway. "They are," she replied, her voice steady. "Don't let them make you feel small, Tom." Hearing my name from her, a stranger, felt like a lifeline tossed across a dark river. I straightened, the folder still heavy in my hands, but not dragging me down anymore. Margaret's words, that vet's quiet nod, they weren't much, but they were enough. I wasn't alone in this, and that changed everything. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I wasn't walking out of here with my tail between my legs. Not today, not after that. I'd find a way to make them listen, even if it meant digging deeper than I ever had before. Margaret's words stuck with me, like a match that wouldn't go out. I stood by the water fountain, the bank's hum fading into a dull roar, phones ringing, papers shuffling, the soft clink of coins at the counter. My folder felt heavier now, not just with my statement and diploma, but with something else. A need to prove I wasn't invisible. I wasn't about to let Ethan's smirk be the last word. I headed home that afternoon, the Rochester sun low and gray, casting long shadows on the cracked sidewalk. My apartment was quiet, just the tick of the kitchen clock and the faint hum of the fridge. I spread my papers across the dining table, the same one I'd used for years to balance budgets, and got to work. I pulled out my old accounting notebooks, dog-eared from decades of use, and started cross-checking. The double charge wasn't a fluke. Line 14, $50, listed twice, clear as day. I dug through past statements, ones I'd kept in a shoebox under my bed, and found 2 more errors from the last 6 months. A $20 fee in March, another in July, both slipped in like they hoped nobody would notice. I jotted notes in my clean, blocky handwriting, dates and amounts lined up like evidence in a case. My coffee went cold, but I didn't care. This wasn't just about my account anymore. It was about every person like me, brushed off because their hair was gray. The next day, I went back to First National. Folder in hand, my steps heavier but surer. The bank was quieter, mid-morning, with only a few people in line. Linda was at her station, her face tight, like she was bracing for a storm. I didn't go straight to her. Instead, I sat in the waiting area, the vinyl chair creaking under me, and watched. Ethan was at the back, talking to a young guy in a polo shirt, all smiles, pointing at a tablet screen like he was selling a dream. A woman, maybe 70, approached Linda with a question about her savings account. Linda's answers were short, her eyes flicking to Ethan, and the woman left, looking smaller, her shoulders hunched. That's when I knew it wasn't just me or Margaret. It was a system, a quiet machine that favored the young and pushed the rest of us out. I caught Linda's eye as she glanced my way, and for a moment she didn't look away. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but then she busied herself with her keyboard. I waited until her line cleared, then walked up, keeping my voice low. Linda, I need to talk. Not about me, about what's happening here. She froze, her fingers hovering over the keys, then nodded toward the corner, away from the cameras. We stepped to the side, near a fake plant with dusty leaves. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Mr. Harper, I saw what happened yesterday. It's not right. They train us to prioritize high-value clients, younger ones, people with big accounts or new loans. Older folks, they tell us you don't understand the new systems, to keep it quick and move on. Her eyes darted to Ethan, still charming, the polo shirt guy. He's the worst. He logs complaints as resolved without checking. I've seen him do it. My jaw tightened, but I kept my cool. You got proof? I asked. She hesitated, then slipped me a folded note with a login code for the customer feedback system. Check the archives yourself, she said, but don't tell anyone I gave it to you. That night I sat at my laptop, the screen's glow harsh against my eyes. Using Linda's code, I accessed the bank's feedback portal, not the public one, but the internal log. There it was, dozens of complaints, from people over 60 flagged as uncooperative or confused. Double charges, hidden fees, brushed off questions, all marked resolved with no follow-up. My hands shook as I printed the logs, stacking them next to my own notes. It was like staring at a map of disrespect. Every entry a person like me or Margaret told to sit down and shut up. 2 days later, I walked back into the bank, my folder thicker now, stuffed with printouts and my handwritten timeline. The air felt sharper, like the edge of a storm. Ethan was at the counter, laughing with a young woman about her new credit card. I didn't wait for an invitation. I stepped up, set my folder down with a thud, and looked him dead in the eye. We need to talk, I said, my voice calm but hard, like steel under frost. He raised an eyebrow, that same smirk creeping up. Mr. Harper, I thought we settled this. You got your update mailed, right? I didn't flinch. I opened the folder, spreading out the evidence, my statement, the complaint logs, my notes. This isn't about my account. It's about a pattern. Double charges, ignored questions. People like me told we're too old to matter. I've got records, Ethan, dates, amounts, complaints you marked resolved without lifting a finger. His smirk faded, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the papers. The room felt smaller, the hum of the bank fading as Linda watched from her station, her face pale but steady. The vet was there again, in line, his cap low, but I saw him nod, slow and deliberate. Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms, his watch glinting under the lights. You're out of your depth, sir, he said, but his voice had a crack, like ice giving way. You think you can walk in here with some papers and play hero? Our systems are audited. You're wasting my time. But his fingers twitched, and he didn't touch the evidence. I pushed harder, my voice rising just enough to carry. Then explain why I found 3 errors in my statements alone. Explain why your logs show 50 complaints from seniors, all closed without a second look. I'm not too old to see what's right in front of me, Ethan, are you? The bank went quiet. A woman in line gasped softly, her purse clutched tight. Linda's hands stilled on her keyboard, her eyes locked on us. Ethan's face flushed, his cool cracking like cheap glass. You don't know what you're talking about, he snapped, but his voice was too loud, too defensive. He grabbed the folder, flipping through it, his hands moving fast, like he could make the truth disappear. I stood my ground, my heart pounding, but my feet rooted. For the first time, I felt seen, not just by him, but by the room, the queue, the years I'd carried. I wasn't invisible anymore. The bank felt different that next week, like the air had shifted, less heavy, but still sharp. I walked in, my folder tucked under my arm, its edges worn but solid, like an old friend who'd seen me through. The fluorescent lights buzzed, same as always, but the hum felt quieter, like the place was holding its breath. Ethan wasn't at the counter. Instead, a new face, a woman in her 40s, hair pulled back, name tag reading, Karen Branch Supervisor, stood there, her posture straight, but not stiff. Linda was at her usual spot, her fingers moving steady over the keyboard, but her eyes flicked to me with a small, cautious nod. I nodded back, my chest loosening just a fraction. After that showdown with Ethan, I hadn't gone home and let it fester. I'd sat at my kitchen table, the clock ticking past midnight, and typed up a formal complaint. Every detail, my double charges, the complaint logs, Ethan's words, went into it, precise as a ledger. I printed it, signed it, and dropped it at the bank's regional office downtown, a gray building that smelled like paper and bureaucracy. I didn't expect much, figured it'd get buried under someone's coffee mug, but 2 days later, my phone rang. Karen's voice was calm, professional, asking me to come in. We've reviewed your concerns, Mr. Harper, she said. We need to discuss this in person. Now, standing in her small office, the door half open to let in the bank's hum, I set my folder on her desk. She didn't rush me, just opened it and scanned the pages. My notes, the logs, the evidence I'd pieced together like a puzzle nobody else wanted to solve. You were right, she said, her voice steady, eyes meeting mine. The duplicate charges were a glitch in the new system. It affected 12 accounts, all seniors. We've refunded them, including yours. My shoulders eased, but I kept my face neutral. What about the rest? I asked, tapping the complaint logs. People like me getting brushed off? Karen leaned back, her pen tapping softly on the desk. We found inconsistencies in how complaints were handled, she admitted. Ethan's been reassigned to a back-office role pending a full review. His approach wasn't in line with our policies. Her words were careful, but I caught the edge. Ethan's charm hadn't saved him. I pictured him stripped of his counter swagger, sorting files in some windowless room, his watch ticking away hours he couldn't talk his way out of. It wasn't joy I felt, just a quiet nod to myself, like balancing a ledger after months of errors. She slid a letter across the desk, official letterhead and all. It was an apology, signed by her and the regional manager, acknowledging my diligence in catching the glitch. They were rolling out new training, she said, mandatory for all staff. How to handle questions from every client, no matter their age. It's a start, she added, her voice softer now, like she knew it wasn't enough. But it was something. I folded the letter, its crisp edges cool against my fingers, and slipped it into my folder. It's a good start, I said, meaning it. The bank's hum felt less oppressive now, like a weight had shifted, not gone, but lighter. Walking out, I passed the vet in his cap. Same spot in line. He gave me a slow nod, his eyes crinkling just a bit, like he'd heard the news. Margaret was there too, her scarf neat as ever, and she flashed me a small smile, her papers clutched less tightly. I didn't stop to talk. I wasn't one for speeches, but their looks said enough. I'd done something, not just for me, but for them, for everyone who'd felt that cold dismissal. That my car was parked across the lot, the Rochester wind biting at my knuckles as I gripped my keys. I sat behind the wheel, the folder on the passenger seat, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Ethan wasn't fired, and the bank wasn't suddenly perfect. But that letter, those refunds, that training, they were proof I'd been heard. I'd spent years thinking my voice didn't carry anymore, that age had dulled it to a whisper. But standing up, laying out those papers, calling out the pattern, that made me feel solid again, like the Tom Harper who'd balanced books and caught mistakes nobody else saw. I started the engine, the rumble steady under me, and knew I'd done more than fix a fee. I'd reminded them and myself that I still had a place in this world. The bank faded into my rearview mirror that day, its glass doors catching the last of the Rochester sun. I drove home, my folder on the passenger seat, the letter from Karen tucked inside like a quiet victory. My apartment was the same, creaky floorboards, the faint drip of the kitchen faucet. But I felt different, steadier, like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. That moment with Ethan, the way he'd tried to erase me with a smirk, it didn't just sting, it woke me up. I'd spent too long thinking silence was easier, that keeping my head down kept me safe. But safe wasn't the same as alive. A few weeks later, I started showing up at the community center down the street, a squat brick building with flyers peeling off the bulletin board. Margaret was there one morning, her scarf swapped for a blue sweater, her hands full of bank statements she couldn't untangle. I sat with her at a wobbly table, the room smelling of burnt coffee and old books, and walked her through the numbers. They tried to pull that too complicated line on me again, she said, her voice sharp but grateful. I showed her how to spot hidden fees, how to ask the right questions. She left with a straighter back, her papers organized, and I felt that same spark from the bank. Proof I could still make a difference. Word got around. Soon, I had a small group, folks like the vet in his cap, a retired nurse named Ellen, even a guy who'd taught math for 40 years. We'd meet twice a week, spreading out forms and bills under the center's flickering lights. I'd bring my old accounting books, their pages yellow but solid, and we'd go line by line. It wasn't about fixing everything, just giving them the tools to push back, to walk into places like First National and not feel small. Every nod, every thanks, Tom, hit me deeper than any paycheck ever had. I learned something through it all. Silence makes you invisible. Age doesn't erase what you know, but letting people dismiss you does. I'd spent years thinking my time was done, that 62 meant stepping aside. But those years, the ones that grayed my hair and creased my hands, they were my edge, not my end. Experience isn't a number. It's every mistake you caught, every late night you worked through. I walked out of that bank a month later, my usual deposit done, and caught Linda's eye. She smiled. Real this time, and I nodded back. The fight wasn't over. Not for me, not for Margaret, not for anyone who'd been told to sit down and shut up. I gripped my folder, the weight familiar now, and stepped into the cold Rochester air, my breath steady, my eyes sharp. I was just getting started. That's my story, folks. The one that started with a simple question in a bank line and ended up changing how I see myself in this world. If you've ever felt shut down, dismissed, or like your voice doesn't count anymore, drop a comment below. What's your take? Have you faced something like this at a bank, a doctor's office, or just out in the world? Share it. Let's build each other up. And hey, if this hit home, smash that like button, hit subscribe for more real talk stories like this, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Your support keeps me going. It really does. Thanks for listening, for sticking with me through the ups and downs. You're not alone in this. Take care, and remember, your voice matters, no matter what they say. See you soon.